I might have an option for you.
I love this place!
Well, hello there. I hope you guys are all doing well today. Wizards of the Coast, in a long series of missteps, may have, well, stepped in it again. This time it looks like they're updating everyone's rules information on D&D Beyond to their new edition of the game, whether you're updating to that edition or not. Many of us have tried telling you that this company does not care about you. They hate their core fan base, and they are going all in on a digital future, banking on microtransactions, much like the hated Madden football franchise. Now, if you've had enough and are willing to switch, there's lots of good options out there. Some I have talked about at length before, but I have so far not talked about the game that my group actually switched to when we had finally had enough of 5th edition. And that game is Castles and Crusades by Troll Games. This game may be the 5e alternative that frustrated DMs and bored players may be searching for. The reason I didn't want to pump out a video immediately after we switched was because I wanted to get some practical experience behind the screen before I opined on it. Now that I have over a year in the DM's chair with this game, I can tell you the 7 things that I like about it, plus one thing I would and did change in it. So without further ado, let's get started. Well, the first thing I love about Castles and Crusades, which you'll hear me shorten to C&C at times, by the way, actually comes from my wife, Mrs. D. Now, Mrs. D has been playing in my now over 29-year-old Birthright campaign since the very beginning. And she likes the scaled-down feel of C&C. To her, and I suspect many others, the game just feels a little bit more personal without the excess power bloat that 5e kind of forces on you. You kind of go from mile high in 5e to ground level in Castles and Crusades, and that's actually not a bad thing. Fighters should be the ones fighting. Magic users should be way in the back, and thieves should be darting in and out of combat instead of standing toe-to-toe on the front lines, which they often do in 5th edition. If you aren't smart, your party could be in for a very bad day. But I also don't think that this game is out to get the PCs. There are tactics that can be used in combat in C&C for advantages, and you're able to disengage from combat without being locked into a death struggle. In our game, one PC, my buddy Crazy Mouse's thief Linus, succumbed to a very powerful creature early on. But even he would probably tell you that it was, in addition to some bad luck, also a failure in group tactics. In one of our most recent sessions, the party's monk was unlucky enough to get 2 criticals hit on him from an aboleth's tentacles, and he had to make actually a death save, which fortunately he passed. But it seems each combat that I've run has at least a baseline of danger to it. Some of them, due to bad rolls on my part, were a lot easier for the party, and some, quite frankly, a lot tougher. But there's no more 5e style cakewalks, which we were running into quite a bit. And as a DM, that's all you want. A world that has danger and reward in equal parts. C&C uses the familiar Vancian-style magic system that D&D has always used, and it works just fine. But in the Castle Keeper's Guide, Castle Keeper being C&C's name for a dungeon master, you can find a couple of intriguing magic system options. You can convert to a mana point-style system, which is actually the one we're using right now. You still choose your spells, but if you need to cast healing multiple times, you have the flexibility to do that. There's also a system where instead of the traditional fire and forget, where the spell goes off automatically, you have to make a die 20 siege engine check. The siege engine, by the way, is the basic mechanic of this game. Roll a die 20, hope for high. I'll expand on it in a little bit. But anyway, that type of system where you have to roll to successfully get your spell off adds a little bit of uncertainty, a la Dungeon Crawl Classics. Hell, you can even sacrifice points of constitution to help a spell go off, like you do in DCC. You can even sacrifice your own life to make sure that that spell goes off spectacularly. I love this sort of flexibility, and I think the players do as well. You can just ignore the other options and go straight Vancian, or you can experiment with something a little bit different. Either way, the right system is probably in here for you. I like that in C&C, not everyone is an expert at everything. In this game, your thief is the one that you are relying on to disable that trap. The ranger is the one you need to track that quarry. Only the bard can sway or influence a crowd. One of the things that always rubbed me the wrong way in D&D from 3rd edition on is how easily other classes can kind of horn in on the specialties of other classes via the skill system. Because C&C has no skill system, it's a lot more difficult to do that. The fighter is allowed to try and disable a trap, for example, but faces a steep penalty of having to subtract his level from the check. It's possible to succeed for low and mid-level challenges, but almost impossible for difficult ones. And of course, the Castle Keeper has final authority over whether a character can even try such a check. A lot of people don't care for class-based games, but if you're going to go with one, this is the way to do it. Not the way D&D has done it over its recent past, which is sort of a combination of the two, which ultimately leads to a less satisfying experience at the table. A thief has a bad moment and misses his roll to detect a trap or find a secret door, but hey, no worries. In 5th edition, everyone in the party can make a perception check, and lo and behold, the fighter overshadows that thief by rolling a 20. So instead of having to find another way around or using their wits to overcome it, they just wear the challenge down with the probability of making 5 rolls. This is a lot harder to do in C&C, thankfully. Now, unlike a lot of games that present themselves as alternatives to D&D, there's a lot of support out there for Castles and Crusades. It is an OGL game, though I believe they are shedding that license in future reprints after Wizards of the Coast attempted stab in the back in early 2023 with the whole OGL fiasco. It's also fairly simple to adapt earlier versions of D&D into this rule set. An experienced DM should actually have no problem at all importing a monster into it. C&C is also bringing back some of Gary Gygax's work that he was doing for the company before he passed. It should tell you something about C&C that Gary was very comfortable working with the Chenaults as an outlet for his material in his later years. I myself like to view Castles and Crusades as sort of the missing link between 2nd and 3rd edition. Some of the mechanical improvements without all of the unnecessary rules bloat. It'll be familiar to RPG players, both old and new, and you have a large base of official Troll Lord products that can help you get started. Now, one thing that I and so many others like about Troll Lord games is that they are expressly non-political. They solidified this stance when one of their employees had a couple of bad days on Twitter and ended up insulting fans for, let's just say, socio-political reasons. It was Troll Lord's public response that garnered a lot of respect for the company. In it, they reminded their employees that Troll Lord has a games-only philosophy and that discussions of politics should be done elsewhere. As someone who despises the proud leftist tilt of all the Seattle area companies like Wizards of the Coast, Paizo, and Green Ronin, this was manna from heaven. No, we don't want our version of RPGs that includes a bunch of right-leaning messaging from ultra MAGA people. We just want good games that evoke Lieber, Howard, and Tolkien. Not whatever this is. In C&C, each class is distinct enough and fills a need so that the players will not feel cheated by their choice of character. I think I counted that at one point in 5th edition, 9 of the 12 classes had the ability to cast magic in some way. This is crazy. C&C, like many OSR games, which it is a cousin to, restores some order here. There's enough unique abilities to make each class interesting, but not so many that each class becomes way overpowered. There's not the addictive get something at every level solely to keep up the dopamine hit in C&C. Here your milestones mean something because combat can be so deadly. And the things you get, while helpful, are not complete game changers at early levels. Fighters getting that extra +1 specialization bonus can really come in handy. Rogues getting better and better with their back attack as they advance. All in all, it's a perfect ballet between choice and balance. Now, as part of the core siege engine mechanic, C&C has players rolling a die 20 and trying to beat a target number after adding some modifiers. Should sound pretty familiar, right? This game asks characters to choose 3 of the familiar 6 attributes as being primary. That's where the difference is. The other 3 attributes are, of course, termed as secondary. What this means is that the base challenge level for checks involving primary attributes, those are your strong ones, is starting at 12. The base challenge level for secondary attributes is 18, a little bit tougher. Think of this as kind of the DC 10 that you start with for an easy check in 5th edition, only here it's kind of dependent on whether you're using a primary or a secondary attribute. On top of the 12 or 18, the Castle Keeper will then add a challenge level based on how hard a particular task is. A fighter who has strength as one of his primaries will find those types of strength-focused tasks a lot easier, obviously. Everyone, regardless of whether it's a primary or secondary attribute check, is able to add their character's level and their actual attribute bonus to all of their rolls. Now, obviously, with a starting point of only 12, characters should succeed more than they fail, even after the Castle Keeper adds that challenge level to it. Not so with checks involving a secondary attribute. With 18 as a starting point, they'll quickly have a target number over 20 for most checks once that level is added to it, making it a lot more difficult. Now, overall, this is a good system that makes characters choose what they're really good at. Are they more physical or mentally focused? But as much as I got the system after going through it a few times, I found that having to constantly differentiate between primary and secondary, 12 and 18 on the spot, it might have bogged the game down just a little bit. And maybe this isn't the case for you, but for me, it kind of was. Fortunately, there is a variant option in the Castle Keeper's Guide. When you use it, all checks actually have a base starting point of 18. For attribute checks with a primary ability, each player then adds, in addition to their level and attribute bonus, a flat +6. That's the difference between 12 and 18. See how that goes? What I've found that works best through experience is having the players put their final check bonus, adding all the math together, and putting that final check bonus right on the character sheet next to the attribute. This just makes things a whole lot quicker and I highly encourage it for anyone that might feel the same way I do. Well, there you go. Overall, I really do like this game. I always kind of thought CNC was just kind of that generic game that was always there, but I never really paid attention to until I actually cracked a book and found that I actually liked it. And I know this game is a 5e killer of sorts because, well, it killed 5e for my group. I think Castles and Crusades scales everything back to a simpler but not simplistic time. This might not be for those who like the Spartan nature of many OSR games, for example, but it is for those who think that rules and option bloat have just gone a little bit too far nowadays. If you're in the market for a 5e alternative, you could do a whole lot worse than Castles and Crusades by Trollord Games. Well, I hope you enjoyed this quick look at CNC. Let me know if you play it and what your experience has been. Or maybe you tried it and it wasn't for you. Either way, I'd love to hear what you have to say about this game. Also, make sure you tune in every Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for The Lair. That's our weekly live stream where we go over RPG news of the day, laugh at some silly people on the internet, and do a little live playing even at the end of our streams. I hope to see you there. It's always a good time. Well, that's all for today. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and until we talk again, goodbye.